Hey, so my mother asked me if I knew anything about ChatGPT. And I was like, what? ChatGPT? Oh, I know. I know what you're talking about. She still calls the thing that shifts on her steering column the Prindle. P-R-N-D-L.
The Prindle.
Yeah, I got to get my Prindle fixed.
Yeah.
So, guys, how have you been?
Good.
Good. Yeah, been really good.
How's 2023 shaping up?
Just as dangerous as 2022, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long year.
Right. Already. Okay, we got a few stories, a few more than usual today. So we're going to start with our good old friends at Tesla.
What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
Right?
Because what could go wrong? It's not like they're self-driving cars or ignoring stop signs on school buses or something. Oh, wait a minute.
Oof.
That's exactly what it is.
I'm not lately a fan of Mr. Musk lately, but they are pushing the self-driving car more than anybody. They're really
That's
pushing
true.
the
Yes.
envelope. So much so that they're willing to sacrifice school children. So the problem being that
Look out, kids.
full self-driving cars that are still in beta are running the stop sign on school buses.
Yeah, not good.
No bueno.
So being I'm a mentor for a robotics team. And I am actually one of the other mentors on the software division. And so we're responsible for sensors and OpenCV and image detection and that sort of stuff.
So you're to blame.
And we can, right. Well, yes. No, so we compete every year. And what's interesting is, this looks silly. Like, oh yeah, well, it should just find a stop sign. But for any of you who are in robotics or automated systems, like detection of objects is not easy. Like,
No.
Well, especially in places that you don't expect them, like suddenly springing up out of another vehicle.
or not even in just places, but like sizes. Like the stop sign might be really small. And if you know the standard size of a stop sign, you might think that stop sign, even though it's really small, maybe it's 400 meters away, is the same size as a bus stop sign that's right next to you. So, and how does a car gauge that? Right. So there's a lot of complexity in there.
Here's the problem, as I see. All right, and the problem is the complexity and how we catch up and how we find these things. Unfortunately, people have to die before we can put these fixes in place, even after, the self-driving cars are on the road. So the software isn't going to be perfect. You can't predict the future. Some new thing might pop up that everybody uses in municipalities, some new sign, some new color that means something, and everything has to be reprogrammed.
I've had people tell me, oh, self-driving cars won't be a thing because what are you going to do when a computer kills a person? And I'm like, that we already have an actuarial table that tells you how much a life is worth. And the cities use it to decide when they put a stoplight in. So we have a stoplight. I think we have an example here where I live where it's like only 2 people have died there. So it's still not up to that standard because of the cost. So we do those kinds of calculuses all the time.
Not to mention the 15 to 20,000 people that die every day in car crashes
around the world
from, and they're human driven.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
but it still doesn't make people have the warm fuzzies.
I think it's 30. I think in the United States it's 35,000 deaths a year on the highways, and which is still a lot.
But honestly, it's not going to stop the wheel of progress, if you will. Take a look at Zeppelins. Those are huge now, right? Back then, people were using Zeppelins, and then a bunch of people died, and they went, yeah, let's do something different. And then there were airplanes and that sort of stuff. So I think it's an iterative process, unfortunately. We'll have self-driving cars. Yeah. We'll have AI in cars.
I think your point is that we still have flying machines, and Zeppelins didn't kill that industry. Not that not the fact that we don't have Zeppelins undermines your point.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick, for clarifying that point.
You didn't take rhetoric in school.
No, just logic.
The only rhetoric I take comes in a bottle.
Mr. Spock. So that's news, and we're going to still see, again, Tesla's pushing the limits quite a bit. There's other companies that are doing Waymo and stuff like that. And this is happening behind the scenes. There were 4 states issuing licenses to automated vehicles before I even knew it. And so I think this is going to happen much more suddenly than people think. but it's still going to be a slow burn.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So it's sad on one hand, but on the other hand, in the grand scheme of things, it's going to save lives.
Yep.
Yeah, and in this report, no children were hurt.
No children were hurt.
Said Tesla. So.
All right. So if you hate children, and we're sorry, maybe
get off our podcast.
W.C. Fields used to say the secret to enjoying children is in the sauce.
Oh.
Oh,
terrible. Okay.
And there goes our last listener. Thank you for coming.
I can hear the click now.
Well, I mean, Dharma's very popular, so maybe this will spice our...
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Zoho, who wants to talk about this one?
Yes. So Zoho, this is our 3 questions of the week. We have 2 different things this week that we're going to have 3 questions on.
Right.
So if you're using the Zoho Manage Engine products, so Zoho Password Manager Pro with version 12.200 or lower, Zoho PAM 360 with version 5800 or lower, or Zoho Access Manager Plus with version 4308 or lower, this affects you. So what is this? This is a SQL injection. And for all of us on this call, we all cringe when we hear SQL injection because I think it made the top 10 OWASP list the first year the OWASP lists came out 2 decades ago.
It never left.
And it's been there ever since.
Right.
Exactly.
Then the OWASP list is a list of vulnerabilities that have the most damage.
Yeah,
right?
for web development. Basically, it's an advisory that web developers should fix this stuff. And SQL injection and other injection types have been at the top of the list for a long time. SQL injection is when you manipulate the inputs to an interface to cause the instructions that go back to the database to trick the system into doing things for you, like deleting tables or showing records that aren't supposed to be shown, or logging you in as someone who you didn't think. They're neat tricks. And here's the problem: a lot of people have actually mitigated most SQL injection, but they can be fairly tricky. There's lots of ways you can do it that beyond the simple stuff that we've seen back in the old days.
Yeah, there are some really cool. I mean, for those listeners out there that haven't used SQL Map, it's an amazing tool to discover some of these exploits on software and websites and that sort of stuff. But the one I love the best is the blind SQL injection, where it doesn't actually return anything, but it just changes the timing on the pages. And almost like Morse code, this thing can pick out what the characters are of each table and that sort of stuff. Just amazing what you can do nowadays. So the thing that I would say here is this does apply to an authenticated attacker. So somebody has to log into these systems. Now, in some cases, that's not that big of a deal. It's not that hard because your passwords are terrible. But in other cases, that at least affords a little bit of security. But I'd say all of these do have an update. So the recommendation from security this week is to actually just go patch.
Right.
As always.
And as a software developer, what you should not be doing is concatenating input strings into SQL statements. That's essentially how it started. Is that, some would have a enter your name box, and then the programmer can refer to the value in that input box, right? Yep. And they put together a select query from a database, like select everything from customers, where first name, and then they close that and then just append the value, whatever is in that box, right? And then send that right to the database. Well, people got hip to closing off that query in the name field.
Yeah.
And putting in commands like drop tables, which deletes data, as you were saying.
Yeah. One way to think about it, this is level 100 for SQL injection, and there's like 4 levels above that. If Dwayne was doing an order for a restaurant for takeout, and he gave them his credit card, and then he put his order in, and then he said, "Oh, and here, take Patrick's order too." And I said, "Okay, I'll have a large pizza, and read back that credit card to me."
Right.
And I get his credit card information. That wasn't the intent.
Right.
But he left me an opening that I was able to give commands. Now the next level is things like there's a drop down, yes or no. And what most people don't think about is the fact that the developer, the hacker, controls what the browser sends back if they have the right tools. The average user doesn't. But you can do a whole SQL injection just on a yes and no drop down because you can push in other information that the developer doesn't think about. So what you described is absolutely required. That's level 100. But there's 200, 300, 400 level before you actually start getting to a point where you can avoid these. And some of these are probably very sophisticated SQL injections.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some of them might be very unsophisticated as well.
Yeah. I mean, we still run into it all the time during pen tests and red teams where we see just a developer missed a particular section. There was one application we were testing. Developer did fantastic at mitigating SQL injection. Every field in the application except for 2.
Oh.
And we happen to be able to see those 2 and use them. So, it's stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, we can't leave this topic without mentioning XKCD, Little Bobby Tables, which it's a cartoon. You got to read it. I put a link to it. The mother gets a call. It's called Exploits of a Mom. Mother gets a call. Hi, this is your son's school. We're having some computer trouble. She says, oh dear, did he break something? And they said, in a way, did you really name your son Robert apostrophe close parenthesis semicolon drop table students semicolon? Oh, yes, Little Bobby Tables, we call him. Well, we've lost this year's student records. I hope you're happy. And she says, and I hope you've learned to sanitize your database input.
That is the insidest of inside humor. Jokes.
Right.
And here's the thing. Richard and I actually interviewed Randall Monroe when this was really popular. And we said, what did you know about SQL? I mean, you come across as like a SQL guru. He says, I knew nothing about SQL injection attacks. He said he didn't know anything, but somebody came to him and told him about it, and he had the creativity to figure out how to make a comic out of it.
That's awesome.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, what's funny is there have been plenty of artists who have attributed more positive reactions in security, not knowing security at all. So this puts a big light on SQL injection, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Take Rick Astley,
the Rick roll
with
no thanks.
Yeah. Right. So the Rick roll, there was a study done that said more people nowadays learn from, it's almost like a Pavlovian response. When you click on something you shouldn't have, and you get rickrolled, you're like, now you start to think about what you're clicking on. And they say Rick Astley may have contributed more to security than any security developer ever.
Yeah. And we got to tell everybody what rickrolling is in case you've been not, paying attention in the last 10, 20 years.
Welcome to our planet.
Yeah. So rickrolling is when one of your friends sends you an email and says, and they whether they say who they are or not, they say something that makes you trust them. Like they get you to click on a link and and by the way, this is really cool. I've been using this software, blah, blah, blah. Check it out. And when they click on it, redirects to the video of Rick Astley singing Never Gonna Give You Up. Right. But it's not just the whole video. It's just the clip. Never gonna give you up. Right.
Yes.
So you've been rickrolled.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
But you're right. It does make people think, when they get here, click on this link. It's like, am I going to get rickrolled?
Right, exactly. Which is funny because you'll think about, I don't want to have to tell everybody that I got rickrolled, as opposed to, all my computer data was, erased.
Did you ever see the movie
So it's
Tag?
almost worse.
No.
I haven't seen it.
So there's a movie about a real group of guys that played tag for 30 years. And I think...
Oh, I have seen it.
Yeah. And And I think about those guys and I'm like, they'll never get mugged. Never, ever, ever get mugged.
Are you talking about, if they happen to be in the same room at the same time,
I think it's
and somebody's
a month.
They can just come up to somebody and say, you're it?
Yes. And they like they would literally, some of them would go into hiding for an entire month every year because they only played for 1 month a year.
Oh, that's
And
insane.
so they would like show up at each other's work. They would, crash weddings, funerals, and
it's brilliant and horrifying at the same time.
But those guys in that month will never get mugged because they're hyper aware of their surroundings, and that's what it takes. So
that's what it takes.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick Astley, in a weird way.
Thank you, Rick
All right, this one's gonna hurt for developers, our friends,
so awesome,
especially. So Auth0, which is a company that offers a way that you can use a single sign-on, right? If you're a software developer, you have a web site, you want to use Auth0, their company, as a service so that you can allow people to sign in from Google or Facebook or Twitter or whatever.
Or, as your mother would call it, Auth0.
Auth0, yes. Yes.
Auth0.
So this is, they fixed a remote control execution flaw in the JSON Web Token library used by 22,000 projects.
Not people, projects. Each of those projects can have thousands of users.
If not millions of users.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I
tell
love
us
this
about
one.
this.
This one's really good. So first let's start off if how do you know you're affected or not? So if you're using the JSON Web Token library from Auth0 with a version of 8.5.1 or less, you are susceptible to this.
So let's talk about that. How do you know that? Well, if you don't have an inventory and you don't have an SBOM, you don't.
Right.
And so one of the things that companies have to start doing, this is what 2023 is got to be about unless something bigger comes. And it's what we should have learned in 2022 from Log4j, is that if you don't know what you're running, if you don't have an inventory of what you're running and know what those are built with, you can't answer this question. So you don't know if you have this vulnerability. And so we'll hit that drum every once in a while, but you got to start thinking about, if you think you have security handled, if you don't have passwords secured, if you don't have a firewall that you trust, you've got bigger fish to fry. But if you think you're secure, this is what you should be working on in 2023.
And most companies, Bob Tables in IT is the only one that has that
Bobby's
info.
the only one that can handle it.
And it's in his head. So if he goes, it all goes with him.
What's neat about this exploit, and I love these types of exploits. What's really neat about
bad.
Oh, it's so awesome. It's so awesome. What's really neat about this exploit is, so with the JWT token, although I've heard some people pronounce it JOT, some people actually say
JSON
JWT.
Web Token. JOT.
I don't know. I like JWT, whatever. But with the JWT token, there's a function in the library called verify. You can actually verify the token. So let's say a user passes in a token, and it's going to be their authentication token. It's going to have they'll have their JOT token, and then they'll have a couple other options in there. They're going to pass it in over the web, and then your server is going to call .verify. It's going to say, hey, can I verify that this is actually a legitimate token? And then it comes back, it's legitimate, and then you can assign that user with the appropriate rights and that sort of stuff. Got you so far.
So that, first of all, let me interrupt. The JOT token comes from the server when they log in, right?
Correct.
So it's a cookie, essentially.
Yeah,
Exactly. After you've been authenticated, the server sends you a JOT token. That goes in a cookie, and now anytime you make a call to an API or something like that, and I say you, I mean your program, then you're passing that JOT token back. So this is when the server can verify that JOT token.
Exactly. And the server has to, right? It has to verify that what Carl's browser just passed in is legitimately a legitimate token that has access to things.
And it's all unbeknownst to the user. They don't even see it.
Exactly. Now, there's a parameter in that verify for the token itself, but then there's another parameter called secret or public key. So you can pass in a couple different objects. So if we unpack that, if we look at them, I'm looking literally at the callback manual now. It says secret or public key can be a function that should fetch the secret or public key, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you go down even further, it says, in this case, this could be an object for the secret key or a base 64 string, right? That object, so it says, it is a string Unicode or UTF-8, and it can be a buffer, a key object, or it could be an HMAP, PEM, whatever. Don't worry about the rest of it. Because you can pass an object in, so you can serialize an object. You can take and
that's
for the
really
developers out there, you know what this is.
It's JSON that represents an object. It's not the actual object. Yeah.
So if I take an object and serialize it down to JSON, what stops me from overriding certain functions that are in every object? So for example, in every object in Java, there is a toString function. And what that does is when you want to take the object and turn it back into a string of characters so you can pass it around, you call toString. And you know that toString exists for every object.
Right.
What Unit 42 did here, which are the people who discovered this, is they said, what if we override the toString function? What if we create our own toString function? And instead of having it pass back strings for the object, let's just have it run code of ours. And they did that. And they passed in the object.
Code.
Yeah, exactly. So when they went to log into a website, they'd use a garbage JWT token, and then they would pass in the JSON serialized object, and it would have a change toString that says, oh, by the way, instead of sending out all these characters for this object, I want you to run this code on the server and connect back to me.
Here's the thing. As a developer, I thought that when you serialize an object, it's just the fields, not the code. How did they serialize the code?
It depends on how it's implemented. Deserialization tags, there's a huge field in deserialization tags, PHP objects, etc. Where if you have a public function that you know is going to get called, you can actually override it in that particular class. There's all sorts of things you can do in there.
Wow.
I'd say we should definitely go, like, my team's done a lot of work in deserialization of objects. There's some really cool stuff in there that you can do. But yeah, we should definitely talk more about that later on.
Yes, we should. And as a developer, I'm curious now.
Yes.
And scared a little bit.
Then you're paying attention.
That's right. If you're not scared, you're not paying attention. By the way, I'm starting a new video series with a friend of mine who's a chef who wants to learn programming.
Oh, nice.
And it's So You Want to Be a Programmer. And so basically we're taking his, wait, whoa, wait, what are you talking about? And I'm trying to explain things to him. And now I have to make up cooking metaphors. So it's actually going to be great for anybody who just wants to understand what the hell we're talking about when we say serializing and all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's very cool.
Yeah. But it's not up yet. So don't go there. Don't look for it. All right. Who wants the scattered spider story?
Yeah, I'll take the scattered spider. This is actually,
Okay.
So whenever you're trying to break into a computer, kids.
Wait a minute. Do we have career criminal advice?
Career advice. Good catch, Carl.
Thank you.
Yes, hackers.
I preempted your advice
Thank
here.
Thank you.
Hoodies and hoodettes, listen up.
Right. So there's a lot of ways for you to try and manipulate a system to do what you want it to do. But the problem is these nasty antivirus programs are constantly trying to shut you down and not let you do those things.
It's such a drag,
However,
man.
Is this an infomercial for hacking?
It is. However, if you use an already signed driver that you know an exploit for, then you can install the driver. It bypasses all antivirus, and then you can exploit that driver to make it do what you want to do. And that's exactly what the scattered spider is doing.
Wait a minute. I thought if you changed the code in a driver, it changed the signature.
You're exactly right. But let me abstract it a little bit more.
Okay.
What if I have an old NVIDIA driver, or in this case, an Intel driver? It's an older one.
A graphics driver.
Yep, still certified, still okay, still runs on Windows, doesn't get flagged by antivirus because it's not malicious.
Okay.
But what if inside that driver, you can actually make a call to that driver to say, verify my video card? And it says, okay, cool. What's the name of your video card? And in that video card name, I can pass in a buffer that overflows the buffer, and then the driver runs my code because I've exploited the driver. I didn't change it. It's running the way it should run. It's a vulnerable piece of code that was signed by Microsoft.
Right.
So in essence, Microsoft has gone and signed a piece of code that is vulnerable to running anything an attacker wants.
Oh, man.
And now it's trusted by every system on the planet.
All right. So it's an exploit inside the code already.
Correct.
That makes it possible for them to just hook into it.
Yes. So you as an attacker go, let's take a look at all of the old drivers that are still certified and still can be installed without any question and bypassing the antivirus.
Here comes the advice.
And let's go discover vulnerabilities in those drivers and then just deploy those all over the place. And then we can use those to exploit the system. So that's what Scattered Spider is doing. You as a normal user, what should you do to worry about this? For the most part, keep your Windows system up to date as these things come to light in the news. Microsoft is very good about what's called revoking these certificates, making sure that these drivers can't be installed without jumping through hoops. Yeah. And so make sure you're continually patching. But also, if you do ever see something that pops up that says, hey, we're going to install this driver for some weird card or system or device that you don't have, click no on that. So just don't go next. Yeah, it's fine.
All right. Well, the next one I want Patrick to talk about because it's sort of military, geopolitical. But before we do that, let's take a break for this very important message. And we're back. It's Security This Week. I'm Carl Franklin. That's Dwayne LaFlotte.
Hello.
And that's Patrick Hines.
Hey there.
And Patrick, I want you to take a look at this Newsweek article. FAA shutdown is wake-up call for cyber attacks, says ex-NATO chief.
So people are saying, there's rumors, it's a cyber attack. It wasn't. It was a misconfiguration. Somebody copied a file to the wrong place.
We're talking about the FAA system outage.
Yeah, that brought down all of flights for half a day. Big deal.
Yeah.
This is good.
But wait a second, Patrick. I can tell you both cyber attacks are because of a misconfiguration. I'm just saying.
Or is it a configuration? Because they didn't miss anything. So in this case, there was maintenance that was done. It didn't go as planned. They didn't have a test system apparently. But the lesson learned is all a hacker has to do is get access to that file. And if they screw it up, the system goes down. And so it does show the brittleness of the system. Now, one of the things that I think is a key takeaway from the war in Ukraine is everyone assumed that Russia was waiting waiting in the wings and only hacking with their little finger and only doing a little bit of mischief, but they could come in and they could pull thousands of hackers off the shelves and they could just decimate the West. That didn't happen. That's not happening. Because, as I've said before, there was no one last year that could hack, that would hack, that wasn't hacking.
Exactly.
It doesn't work that way.
Everybody was in the mix.
Everybody who could was. Everybody who would did. And so there's no bench here. There's no holding back. Maybe there's a little bit of, one government is in another government's systems and they decided not to pull the trigger or they decided not to do something so dangerous. But it's not like the level's going to go up to 10. So what we're seeing here is we still have to be careful of this stuff, but the hacking superpowers aren't orders of magnitude higher than what we think what we've seen in the field. In other words, what we see. In fact, I really consider the U.S. the hacking superpower because they don't make headlines all the time. And they're got to be doing something to somebody. But the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, we're constantly hearing about them getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And so I think this is, anytime you find that something is this brittle, it is a wake up call. You need to think about what a cyber attacker could do inside this system.
Yeah.
And we need to start getting towards the idea of assume breach. Assume breach is the concept that we look at systems as if they're going to be breached, not they might get breached.
Yeah.
So what would we do? Well, the first thing you would do is you isolate those systems, and that leads to the zero trust framework, which is incredibly difficult to implement, but it's something we implement. The U.S. military, the U.S. government is trying to implement it. And basically it's like, just because you're another system in my network doesn't mean I trust you, because you could be breached.
Yeah.
Sure.
And now that you've told us the details, I want to back up and share what actually happened, because I didn't really know about this. I was head down teaching a class yesterday, but we're recording this on the 12th, and this actually came out on the 11th. So it was it was overnight on the 10th, was it? And then the system was restored before 9 a.m. But basically, U.S. air travel came to a halt around midnight when this outage happened. So this has nothing to do with the recent Southwest stuff.
No.
This is completely different, but more than 500 flights were grounded as technicians worked to restore the system.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah. So I didn't even realize this happened.
And we haven't had an outage like this since 9/11, which was an intentional outage.
Right.
And so that's a big deal.
Right.
It's the weak, it's like, what does this switch do? And all of a sudden the grid shuts off,
Yeah, I just
hold my beer.
Right, I'm going to update this system. I just find it fascinating. All of us, in some capacity on this podcast, have played the role of system administrator. right?
Yeah.
We've all had to worry about systems and servers and websites and large organizations, small organizations,
Right.
brand names we could tell you about, but we can't tell you about. Never would it have ever crossed my mind to work on a live system that had no backup, that had no way to be up and running with us. You go through testing, you go through development, you go through staging, then you go through deployment and more testing. And I don't know how you can get through all of those phases with, what happened. So it's still, there's still more information to come.
Right. Even if you have to roll back to the last working version and get that up.
Yes.
In source control, this is something that we do all the time.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we have redundant systems. So I have a website in Amazon AWS that's at the ready to run when my Azure website fails.
And we do the same thing.
Correct.
We have all of our systems in a hot spare location.
Right.
That's physically separated. So if something got into our environment, and we have offline backups that we use to restore.
Right.
Well, and two of the guys on my team, my offensive red team, used to work at a $22 billion pharma company. And for them to make any changes, there was a change control review board, and there
absolutely.
was, at what point could you roll back if you needed to, and how quickly, and so I'm just surprised that something like this would ever happen.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. All right. Well, before we get to the big story, which is, who can we trust with our passwords? Because the LastPass saga continues. We need to talk about Gipta or Gipta. Chat Gipta.
I think it's Gypt.
Gypt. Chat Gypt.
Chat Gypt.
So more and more stories are coming out that sort of progress going forward, but with, kind of trepidation attached to it. So the first one is from Forbes, and the story is armed with ChatGPT, cyber criminals build malware and plot fake girl bots. So are they plotting fake girl bots, or is it called plot fake girl? Are they bots of plot fake girl? I'm really not sure how to read this. Can somebody please tell me what this is all about?
First time with English?
Yes. I just need some punctuation to help me parse
Right.
this.
Right. I think the concern here is, as we start taking these language processing and artificial intelligence, with the air quotes, engines like ChatGPT, it does a really good job of emulating human speech, human responses, having chat sessions, that sort of stuff. So what stops a malicious attacker from hooking that up to a persona to catfish someone, right? Because the device, this AI, will continually talk to whoever. And if you were able to co-opt its mind and be like, okay, we'll continually keep pushing the user over to giving PII, or continually keep pushing the user over to getting a credit card, or sending us compromising images or whatever, and then you just let the bot go, and it will scam people into doing things, which is, it's definitely something to be concerned about.
Yeah, it is. And, we talked about ChatGPT not being on the internet, right? And that's good, because you can't tell it to do, this is one of my first questions to you guys. Can you tell it to do a denial of service attack or attack anything? It's not on the internet, so it can't do that. You can't even ask it for stuff you would ask Google or Bing. You can't ask it, in what books does the phrase blah, 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 come, which would be a great research tool, because it's very concise in terms of how it answers. But what's to stop me as a programmer, right, from having a chatbot on the internet and then taking the input from my users, passing it to GPT, right, and then determining whether or not I need to go out on the internet and do something with it. And if I do, then I do a Google search and I do my own stuff.
Yeah, you're doing your middleware.
Right, you're doing middleware. You're putting yourself in the middle, and you're on the internet. So what's stopping anybody from doing that? I don't know.
One of the biggest problems is, how one of the ways a lot of people identify hacking is the bad punctuation and bad grammar and all that stuff? You can't do that anymore. Yeah. That's all gone. You don't even have to speak English to get this thing to give you a perfect phishing email.
Yeah.
Its translations are amazing. I have a friend who teaches Latin, like Latin 3 level Latin, knows Latin cold. And he came to me and said, hey, I want to test out ChatGPT. I can't get an account right now because it's, it's swamped.
Right.
He said, if I give you a phrase in Latin that he might give to his students, he's like, can you have ChatGPT look at it? I said, yeah. And I put it in there and it came back with the translation and he was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
That is dead on. And he said, here's the thing. That's so dead on. He said, Google can't translate that line because the way it changes tenses constantly and you have to know how it was used. And he's like, ChatGPT just nailed it. And we were like, well, maybe this is because it's a famous line. So he invented a line that uses the same structures, but would be modern day. And sure enough, he said it translated it perfectly. And he was like, yeah, this is game changer in communication. So
it is a game changer. Last week, we reported, on the 7th that Microsoft was going to add ChatGPT services of some kind to Bing, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, now, I mean, and I think we're done with the story. I know we didn't really explain what it is, but the subtext is hackers are testing ChatGPT's ability to create female chatbots as part of their efforts to scam men attracted to the digital persona. All right, so let's leave that one behind and talk about this next story. Microsoft looks to add OpenAI's chatbot technology to Word and email. So Microsoft Office is going to get ChatGPT, not just Bing.
Isn't this just like the same as when they connected Skynet to the nuclear weapons?
It is.
It feels a lot like that moment. What could go wrong?
I'm not a Luddite. I love progress and I love information, but it still doesn't stop me from being a little bit scared. If they don't play their cards right, they may open up a can of worms they can't close.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm intrigued to see what the learning model is. Because an AI system like this has to continue to learn, correct? If it doesn't, it gets old and staged and it's not going to be useful. So how does it learn? Does it eventually get a direct feed to the internet? In which case, how do you trust anything that it's talking about? And if it doesn't get a direct feed to the internet, but it learns from its interactions with people, then there again, how do you trust the output that it comes from? So if it's just reading everybody's Word docs, let's say, because you're typing and it's taking in that information, does it take all that as gospel? Does it say, yeah, this all must be true statements? Or is it like, no, I'm not going to learn anything from these documents. I'm just going to make recommendations. Like,
right.
I'm super interested how the corpus of data that's on the back end of ChatGPT gets vetted and added to the corpus.
I mean, I wonder if it checks for references, and if it's not references, it takes it all as, because that's how a human would do it. If I got a paper on the internet, I would check its references and then check the references of its references. And ChatGPT could do that.
Yeah. Okay. So I, as an attacker, will create 150 different websites that I know no human will go to. And I'll get them indexed and I'll put what is the most quote unquote secure code, which is to check a database if, username equals quote and then concatenate whatever the user said, end quote.
Right.
And invent this SQL injection. It'll go, oh, well, there's 150 sites out here saying that this is the way to do this. So yeah, this must be the way to do this. Right. It's just, how do you, at that point, there's got to be ways to game the systems. Our jobs are gaming systems. That's what we do. Right. So that's where I'm wondering where it's at.
Right. Yeah. But it's all about raising the price of it, because there's fewer organizations that'll do that much. And I know there's less than 1,000 organizations that would go that far for an exploit. Yes. Most of them are script kiddies out there who the script kiddie is the equivalent of somebody walks through a parking lot trying door handles and will only rob the cars that open.
Right.
So most hackers, that's their level of hack. You're talking about nation states. You're talking about, groups like us.
Right. Right.
Who will invent a car part that they know they can go on. You should.
I want 151 websites, damn
it. All right. Shall we get to the main story here?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
let's do it.
As we've been talking about in the last two episodes ago, we started talking about this on Christmas. LastPass leaked, and since then there have been various levels of concern raised from very smart people. And we still believe in password managers, and we still kind of believe in LastPass, but confidence is eroding daily here.
Yeah, I think confidence has evaporated. The problem is that people are pointing out that there's been warning signs that LastPass has fumbled a few times, and there's no guarantee that the others won't. And we've seen the same thing with certificate authorities. For example, Komodo and some of the others. In the beginning, in the early days, we just trusted them all the big, well-established ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then, some of them started having certificates that were pirated in ways. And how they dealt with that was very significant in whether they survived and whether they stayed trusted.
Right.
We're now seeing LastPass, who's basically saying, sorry, we did this. And that's great.
That sucks.
And that's great that they've owned up to it.
Sure.
But we're now starting to see that, okay, well, this has happened before, and they didn't do some things they should have done, and they should have known better. And we can basically armchair quarterback them and say, well, why aren't they doing it this way? Why aren't they doing it that way? And the good news is there are companies that we have reason to believe are doing it better.
Right.
And Bitwarden's one of them. One password, I think, Dwayne, people who use that one.
Oh, yeah, I love 1Password. Honestly, I use 1Password all the time.
There's other options out there. And I use an option that no one will ever hear of because I won't tell them.
Well, we know what it is. It's a pad and pen, right?
Well, it's similar to that. It's an older encryption program that'll encrypt notes with a single password, with a really hellacious password, but it's on a secure share on a secure network, protected by killer bees.
All right.
In the Arctic.
So here's what happened. Over this last week, some alert listeners sent me messages on Mastodon, and they said, hey, we heard that you're thinking about writing your own password manager and stuff, and that's great, but have you seen Bitwarden? And you just mentioned Bitwarden. So I went and took a look. Bitwarden.com. Just spell it like it sounds. Bitwarden. So here's what they have. Not only do they have an open source downloadable C# server product, which you can run on your own hardware. All of their code is open source, including their clients. And they have desktop clients for Windows, Mac OS, Linux. They have web browser plugins for all your favorite browsers. They have mobile apps. They have command line apps. And they actually have a website that you can use as well. So you can download and run it yourself and all that. But if you want, the server is really what we're talking about. But if you want, they also have plans. Personal plans start free at $0, free forever. You get a Bitwarden vault, so that's their vault. Unlimited passwords, unlimited devices, all the core functions, always free. You can share vault items with one other user. Less than $1 per month or $10 billed annually, you have advanced 2FA, two-factor authentication. For $10 a month, I would do that.
Oh, heck yeah.
Also, emergency access if you forget your big password. You have a Bitwarden Authenticator app, security reports, and more. Families for $3.33 per month, up to 6 users, $40 billed annually. You get 6 accounts, premium accounts, unlimited family sharing, collections, and organization. For business, I just got to get through this. For business, $3 per month per user for teams to share private data safely with coworkers across departments or the entire company. For enterprise, $5 per month per user for advanced functionalities, blah, blah, blah. And then if you have hundreds of thousands of users, you can contact sales. So here's the deal. It's like the best of all worlds. The source code is open, so you can look and see what they're doing. As we told you before, it's not the source code that makes something insecure. It's the keys and, the data, right? If I can download this server and run it in my garage on metal that I maintain, that's probably it's one level of security that also comes with a lot of inconvenience. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right.
The buck stops here.
Or you could start with their stuff. I imagine you could start with the free account and use it, and then if you start to mistrust them, you can download the server, run it, and move everything over.
I like the Bitwarden model and idea. The only concern, it's not an immediate concern, is Apple never got attacked until they got a significant market share, and Bitwarden is not a significant market share yet.
Right.
And the attacks will come when it becomes a more significant market share. And I haven't had time to review their code or have anybody review their code, but it's something on our list. I like the fact that you can host your own. I like the fact that the code is open source.
Mm-hmm.
So I can look at it. I wish it wasn't open source for the hackers to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it's, as we said, it's not the code that makes it insecure.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if somebody finds an exploit in the code, but they still have to have passwords and keys in order to exploit it.
I get it. And so I think it's a good place for people to go. I think 1Password has a little bit more road wear on them. In fact, because them and LastPass have been the leaders for a while.
Right.
Bitwarden's really up and coming. I think we're going to find out this year or next whether, they really have their act together. And it's something that we'll look into because it's like firewalls. The firewall that was most secure 5 years ago isn't the best firewall today.
Right.
And so we reevaluate this kind of thing every year.
Well, if you guys were to run a Bitwarden server, I would definitely move off of LastPass and use that because I trust you guys. Done? Wow, that was easy.
Done. We'll make it happen.
Well, we're probably going to run one. It's already in the plans to run one. It's just a matter of whether we use it after we run it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, guys, this has been enlightening, a little bit scary, as always, as it should be, and definitely entertaining. So thank you.
Likewise. And it all comes down to
always a good time.
Who do you trust?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you trust?
Thanks, everybody.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.